missing me so long? Welcome to the Tempest Universe. And Manny, today's special, Robin with fried rice.
China.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
It's China to me, China.
Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside.
China.
This is the Tempest Universe, man. Hold on to your ass. You're in for a hell of a ride.
Welcome back to the Tempest Universe. It has been about 2 weeks. I had to take a break. I had to take a break from UFOs, UAPs, and all the other goodies. But what better way to come back than to have a return interview with Preston Dennett. Last time he was here was 2019. And for those who don't know, Preston has been investigating UFOs since the late 80s. He's had countless of books. I just talked to him. He's got like 30 out there right now. Hundreds of articles. He's been on, a MUFON investigator. He's also been on Coast to Coast. I mean, why not, right? History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs, or should we say USOs, UFO Hunters, tons of articles, like I said, Daily News, LA Times. The LA Daily News. But without further ado, let's bring on Preston Dennett. Welcome back, Preston.
Thanks, Manny. Thanks for having me on.
Man, what an intro. One of the things that I came across, which I didn't last time, and I want to just jump into this real quick. You have a book that it speaks to me currently because I cannot understand how this works. But let's talk about out-of-body exploring. How long were you into this? It sounds like you've been doing this for some time.
Yeah, a real long time. It kind of came right along with UFOs when I started investigating them. I started to get interested in dreams. My mom had passed away a few years earlier. I was having real vivid dreams, lucid dreams about her coming into my room and saying, I'm okay. You don't need to grieve. Sort of not so much saying that in words, but giving me that message. And I didn't believe in life after death or ghosts or UFOs or anything. So I was trying to discount it, but I couldn't because I knew on some level it was her. I mean, I just felt the quality of her presence.
Right.
It led me into researching dreams, which led to lucid dreaming, which led to out-of-body experiences. There's a bunch of books on it. And I read one that just changed my life, which was Robert Monroe's books. The first one I think is, what's it called? Far Journeys or Journeys Out of the Body, something like that. And he gave exercises on how to do it at the end of his book. He just described his own personal experiences with it. And I thought, well, he sounds sincere. This sounds like it's real. I don't know.
Right.
But at that point, I had found out that, of course, UFOs were real. My family had seen them, and I started talking to people who've had other experiences like this. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, let's give it a try. And it took me about 2 months of really, doing the exercises, really, with discipline, putting a lot of effort towards it, because my dream recall started just going through the roof right away.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, first few weeks, I'm like, whoa, there is something to this. The exercises were basically just meditation. Really, that's what it was all about. Relaxation, meditation, visualizations, this sort of thing.
It's really difficult, though. I can see why it took so long, because I've been trying it for about a month, and I cannot meditate. I fall asleep, completely asleep, or I just can't clear my mind at all.
I totally get that. When I first started meditating, honest to God, a brass band would start playing in my head. Trombones and cymbals. And I started to realize I've got levels of, thoughts running through your head. The song you were thinking, the things you have to do tomorrow, the people you're having trouble dealing with, or just everything is. But it slowed down. The more I meditated, the more I really focused on it. And I remember the first time it happened vividly. Robert Monroe, he talked about, you might feel a mild electric sort of sensation, like a mild electric shock almost. And your body will start vibrating and you're ready to go. And I'd laid down in bed. I was kind of depressed. I was going through a lot. And this was during the day. I was awake. I just laid down on my stomach. And suddenly my body felt really heavy, and then it started vibrating. And I couldn't move. And I thought, oh, I must have stuck my finger in the light socket next to my bed. Is what I thought, because I started to feel a really powerful electric shock just pulsing through my body. And I did not know what was happening until I popped out of my body. Boom. And I'm in my bedroom. I'm like, oh my God. I was completely out of control. Long story short, I just flew out of my bedroom, through the hall, into the bathroom, and grabbed the counter and looked in the mirror. I'll never forget looking into the mirror and not seeing myself. I'm thinking, well, that is weird.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when I knew this was real. I got pulled instantly back because, I was so shocked. And strong emotion will pull you back. And it was weird because I saw someone in my room. As I'm falling back into my body, I'm like, who's that? I couldn't quite see them. My vision wasn't fully there.
Right.
Short little guy, real short. I'm going to say 4 to 5, under 5 feet.
Oh, this is during your experience, so it wasn't you.
Yeah, it was not me.
Oh.
I always wondered about that because, people have spirit guides, but he was so darn short. Now I'm wondering if it could have been ET related. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, that was my first experience. Dropped back into my body. I was so excited. My depression just lifted. I was like, oh my God, there's life after death. This is real. I'm going to try this again. And I did. I started doing it every darn weekend.
Wow.
Because that's when I could, I work full time back then. And 35 years, just recently, I don't work full time. Well, I do on the books and stuff. But
Right.
But yeah, that was how it started for me. And man, oh man, I cannot tell you how much that changed my life.
Really? I always wondered about that because you read so many stories of people that have these experiences, or people who do remote viewing, and people that just meditate in general, how this changes just their outlook altogether, the way they perceive things. And I don't know. I guess as of late, I'm searching for that. And so the last few weeks, like I said, I've been trying it, even with some of the listeners, we call the Asgardians. And it's the weirdest thing. I just couldn't get it together. But it looks like by chance, I just happened to come across your book. And I'm like, hey, this is something I got to download.
Yeah, well, I hope people try it. Even if you're skeptical, give it a try. I think there's really 3 main obstacles. It's skepticism. People don't think they can do it. They don't think it's real. Fear. People are like, well, that sounds kind of scary.
It does.
And yeah, which I get. But the fact is you're doing it every night. And the day is going to come when you are out of body and you won't be able to get back in.
You're right.
It happens to us all. Exactly.
You get the permanent boot from your physical body, and you have to go celestial. An incredible find. So hopefully folks will look at this book, especially the folks who have been working with me to get into this realm of exploration, because it looks like it's going to be a fantastic book to get into.
Do it.
Yeah,
Please try.
absolutely.
Just try it.
Yeah, I got to say this. I think I had an experience way back in my late teens, and I'll never forget it. It's just kind of like you describe it. It's so surreal, and you really. I'll be honest. I was shitless. I was scared. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was so scared. But I've never been able to return to that. So.
Most people will have at least one. I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've taught people how to do it. It's not hard. It really isn't. It's a natural human talent. Some people do have a steep learning curve. Other people, I'm like, this is what you do. And they call me back the next day. I'm like, I did it. I'm like, really? Wow.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's definitely doable.
But an interesting find in the library of 30 books that you have out there, which most of them cover the phenomena of UFOs, which been coined lately as UAP. I tried to reject that, but I'm not so happy about UAP. I like UFO.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. So take us back just to introduce you to some of the guys and gals that have not come across a Preston Dennett book. Let's go back to the mid to late 80s. And was it you had experiences, you had people around you who experienced things, but they caught your interest and you started to dive into it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent I was prepped for it. I've always been real into science, and honestly, I loved science fiction.
Mm.
So, Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and all those guys. So in a way, I already knew about the idea of aliens, but not for a second did I think they were visiting our planet.
Right.
And the only introduction I'd ever really had to that in any serious way was the show In Search Of, which dates me. I mean,
Right.
that was from the 70s, I think.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was still pretty young. In 1986, I was 21 years old and not a believer in anything paranormal. But this report came on the news about a sighting over Alaska. It's very well known, so I won't get into it. But Captain Kenju Torochi and his crew saw a UFO over Alaska. And it paced their plane for an hour. It was on radar. It was a great sighting. But the news just kind of laughed about it. And I remember they showed the picture of this pilot, and I thought, that poor guy.
Right.
What an idiot.
Yeah, he's catching it now.
Yeah, but, I thought, gosh, my brother Mark, he said he'd seen a UFO years earlier, like 77, 78, around there. And I didn't believe him, not for a second, but asked him about it after I saw this news report. And he said, oh, yeah, me and my two friends, we chased it down the
really?
boulevard. Yeah, in their car. They were passing other cars, chasing this perfect disc, the little couple on top, colored lights, metallic looking, silent, treetop level. It would stop and wait for their car to catch up, and then it would go forward, which was really kind of interesting to me later on, especially when I started hearing other reports like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was the piece. That was the straw, I guess, that broke the camel's back.
There you go.
But it kind of snowballed from there. I mean, my sister-in-law had a sighting with two friends. Another friend had a sighting. She had a friend with her. Another friend who also had, all of these people who had sightings had supporting witnesses. That was a shock to me, because I kind of thought people who saw UFOs were alone, on drugs. I don't know. I had all these misconceptions.
Yeah.
I was so wrong. I was so wrong. Yeah. People at work. It ended up like a quarter of the people I knew, a full, 20, 30% of the people.
Really? That is quite a lot.
Yeah. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
How can this possibly be? Is it because of where I live? No, I don't think so. Because some of these people saw stuff, in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what's going on? I finally figured it out. I mean, it's my opinion. I think this is a lot more common than people, the general public certainly thinks. But I think even within the UFO community, people don't realize how common, being taken on board is.
And it's weird, because I heard someone, because I tend to listen to other podcasts as well, but I heard one guest comment that it is very possible that people are either that than they actually realize, and the number itself could be astronomical.
Millions, I think.
Significant amounts. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that
it's several
kind of blew my mind. Mm-hmm.
Well, some contactors I've talked to have told me pretty much everyone has contact on some level, whether they're aware of it or not.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they were saying. Now I was like, it almost makes sense, right? It almost makes sense. And then there's the idea that the folks that realize or who actually remember these situations were meant to in some way. So it's nuts. Now, so you got decades of writing books and researching and talking to people, but have you yourself had any kind of UFO experience?
I have.
As an experiencer. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Let's hear about that one.
It kind of started to ramp up slowly, and just has continued sort of arithmetically, maybe not geometrically, if you know what I mean. I've just, started to have more and more and more sightings until at one point I'm like, well, these guys are aware of me, and having dreams of being on board more recently, and then actual, live experiences. Yeah, I'm going to say for sure. And the first one, I started to see unexplained lights.
Right.
And I was like, no, sorry, that's not good enough. That could have been a shooting star. I'm just not going to believe it, because that kept happening. And I'm like, no, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. Because finding out this UFOs were real in a weird way made me question everything. And I just wasn't ready to go there unless I knew for sure. Because I'd been lied to my whole life. And I was just kind of jaded a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, it happened in 1990. Let me think for a second. 1992. Yeah, late July. It was probably around July 29th, 25th, around there. Because I remember, I'll never forget it, even though I did forget it after it happened. I will never forget it. I was driving home from my brother Mark's house, and his wife, Christy, who's the artist for most of my books, they were helping me a lot. I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I was out of my mind with this.
Were you?
Oh, yeah, for years. It took me 5 years to just wrap my head around all of this. And this was, July 1992. I was in the middle. A huge UFO wave had just sprung up where I grew up, Topanga Canyon. So I was interviewing people every day. I was putting up flyers. I had gone to the police, giving them my number. I was going door to door. I was calling people from the phone book. I was going to find out what happened, because there was a wave of sightings, and it had the whole gamut. When UFOs were landing, they were chasing cars down the road. People reported being taken on board, everything you can imagine. And so I'm like, I was just going a mile a minute with this. And I'd stayed up late. It was a Sunday, and it was time to go home. I lived about 5 miles away in Canoga Park. They were in Woodland Hills. This is, again, Southern California. And I'm like, I have to go home. It's late. I got to work. And I just left their house. It's a tiny little side street. You can't go more than 5 or 10 miles an hour. And there was this one corner right close to Canoga Boulevard, Canoga Avenue, where it's a hairpin corner. And you really have to go about 2-3 miles an hour, because it's not only very tight, it's steep as well. And so I'm just inching around this corner when I saw something come swooping down towards my car. And having had sightings since then, your mind goes through this weird process of like, what's that?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Is that a bird? That was my first thought. And I'm thinking, it's not a bird. It's late at night, and it's glowing. And it's round. Something, it's a firecracker. Because, late July, people were still a little bit, but it was pretty late. In terms of days after 4th of July. And then, of course, it drops down right in front of my car, and it's this little, like, golf ball. And it's glowing.
Like an orb type thing?
Yep, exactly. Not big, but not super bright. Orange, white. And solid. It was not vaporous in any way. And it stopped, dead stop, right in front of my face. And then I'm thinking, okay, reflection. Even though I knew it wasn't, because I saw this thing come down. And so I'm going like that. Well, that isn't a reflection. And it's looking at me, because you can tell it's looking at you. I don't know how to describe that, other than I felt a sense of intelligence.
Yeah, you can feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes back and forth. The full length of my windshield, fairly slowly, and then stops again. I remember that. I'm thinking, oh, okay. It's over the hood of my car. This is how close. It's a 1 foot away from my windshield. And then it goes forward. It dips down over the front of my car, almost scrapes the asphalt. And I remember it shoots straight up, and I'm gripping my the steering wheel. Yeah. And watch it go right up. And that's all I remember. And in fact, I forgot the whole darn thing.
Really?
Forgot it.
How long did it take before it came back to you?
It was a few months.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is, I've interviewed enough people who've had that happen. So, and it would always baffle me. I'm like, you're crazy. You telling, because this one guy told me UFO landed on the street right in front of them. And then it took off. They ended up being taken on board. But he says, we all forgot about it. There was 4 of them in the car. I'm like, what do you mean you forgot about it? Like, I'm telling you, we just didn't talk about it. We forgot about it. It went to the back of our minds. I don't know how to explain it. And now I get it, because I don't know exactly what the process is going on there, the mechanics behind it.
Right.
I suspect it's sort of an agreement between the ETs and the person involved.
Just to keep it quiet.
Yeah, for your own benefit, perhaps, so you don't completely freak out. But yeah, I remembered it, but I don't remember what happened. I really do think I was taken on board. I honestly do, because it's your classic. It's got all the red flags.
Yeah, you've got that. Did you have the lost time?
Yeah, I don't remember driving home. I can't say that.
Really?
I don't remember driving home. No, I don't remember that night at all. And I've had sightings since then where I'm like, oh my God, and I call up, you're not gonna believe what I just saw.
Right.
So yeah, it has all the red flags of that. And that's when I started dreaming, well, I was having UFO dreams before that. Who am I kidding? I was. And, more recently I started searching my past. Well, I shouldn't say more recently. I've always kind of searched my past, looking for incidents, but there's a few. I did kind of pin down one missing time incident as, oh gosh, I'm going to say about 9 years old.
Oh, really? That young?
Yeah.
That is incredible. So I know you said like you mentioned your brother having seeing UFOs and stuff like that. Anybody further back?
In terms of like relatives?
Like family members? Yeah.
No. I never got to ask my mom, having passed away. My grandparents, I never met my grandfathers. My grandmothers weren't into that. I did ask my father's mother. She's like, it's against my religion. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And I certainly asked my dad, but he was a vehement skeptic.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I wonder about him, because he was so vehement against it, which is, I've learned another sort of pointer towards, because, if you have a strong emotional reaction to this subject, there's a reason for that.
Right. Yeah.
And he was psychic too. He did not think so,
oh.
But he was. I've got several examples of where he'd call things before they happened. He'd be like, Dad, you're psychic. And he'd just kind of roll his eyes at me. He's like, it's a coincidence, Preston. I'm like, I don't know.
Maybe not so much.
Yeah. That psychic, that's another thing that goes hand in hand with this. So
yeah, it's
it
incredible.
Is my family.
It is.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Psychic abilities. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not so much that, but the UFOs, because both my sister-in-laws have seen ETs face to face.
Oh, there you go.
And their children, and my sister's child had a close-up UFO sighting. And I know from experience and having interviewed people, when you see a UFO and it's within 100 feet, 200, that's contact. You probably were taken on board. They're sending you messages. Something's going on.
Yeah, that is incredible. I can't even imagine what that would feel like. Even remembering, weeks or months later, the overall shock to your system. But you've interviewed how many people over the years? Because you're looking at over 3 decades. Oh
yeah, it's many, many hundreds. I am not sure. I've hit probably thousands, if you want to say, in terms of talking to people at conventions. But when I do a formal interview, I insist on recording it. Oh, I want to get the details right,
Right.
And if people are like, don't really want to be recorded, I'll talk to them certainly, but I'm not going to write about their experience, because I need to have proof that, Yeah. And I need to get the details right, and I need to do multiple interviews, but yeah, it's many hundreds, and in some respects, thousands.
Yeah. Of those interviews, which one would you say? I'm sure it's hard to pick one, but is there one that you always go back to? Is like, yeah, that that really was the one.
Yeah, I would say there's a good handful, really.
Really?
I think the first one that really hit me hard was my sister-in-law, honestly, because this was very early on and there weren't a lot of books out. There was a handful of books, honestly. I mean, there was the books by the Lorenzens, which were really hard to find, and Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, was a hardback. It was not, published by a major publisher. It was Richard Merrick Publishers. It wasn't a bestseller. It was real hard to find. I found it. And that was the first one that started to really break through to the public.
Right.
This was before Communion came out. So there weren't a lot of books. There was, the Travis Walton first book, one on Betty Andreasson, Betty and Barney Hill.
Right.
That was about it. And so I'm talking to my sister-in-law, who really doesn't want to be identified. So I use a pseudonym for her. But at any rate, she says, well, she had described the sighting. And a year or two later, she's like, well, I do have another story if you're interested. I'm like,
oh, okay.
I'm obsessed with this subject. What? So by that time, I had read Missing Time, and I knew what grays were. Grays were not on TV, really, at all. So she started to describe this encounter with grays. And she was walking in front of Stagg Street Elementary School in Van Nuys late at night. This is when she was in college in the late 70s. And so saw what she thought were two children in front of the school in the courtyard, right under the spotlight. The street, well, it wasn't the street light, it was the school spotlight. And she was on the side of the street closest to them, walking with a shopping cart that she was retrieving to bring home, and walking with her dog, Sarah. And she's like, what are those two kids doing out late at night? It's past, 11. It's almost midnight. And she's like, God, they look weird. And her first thought was they were wearing masks, but it wasn't anywhere near Halloween. This was summer. And as she walks right up to them, she's about 10 feet away. They swivel. She says they must have been floating because they kind of just swiveled, like opening a book, sort of, and looked at her. And she says it was like being woken up when you're awake, because they weren't. Yeah. I'm like, what do you mean they weren't human? She says, I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know what these were. But they had big dark eyes, and they had these huge heads, and tiny little mouth, almost no nose. She's an artist. I had her draw them for me.
Oh, awesome.
She said they were wearing olive green jumpsuits with mandarin collars. She's got an eidetic memory, pretty much.
Right.
Whenever we're watching a movie, we're like, what happened like 5 scenes ago? And she's like, oh, she can, she names all of it. When she tells you a story, she will tell you every darn detail. And I was so glad to hear the details in this story. Her dog didn't react. They looked right at her. Dog never reacted.
Oh, interesting.
She says, I was about 10 feet away. And she says, as soon as she realized that these were not human, she ditched the shopping cart. Because it was going click, 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 click.
Right.
Put it into the bushes and just walked as fast. She didn't want to run. She says, she was quite frightened. She never saw a UFO. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, well, I mean, I didn't see one. One could have been behind the school. The school was shaped like a U, like a
like I had a little courtyard kind of
a horseshoe with trees blocking one side. So it could have just plopped down there, she said. I don't know, but she just walked away as fast as she could. She has no evidence of missing time or anything like that. No communication. They didn't say anything. But hearing her describe, just going from top, I'm like, describe the head down to the toes. I'm like, check, 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 check. I mean, my stomach dropped out of me. I'm like, those are ETs. Those are grays. She's like, what? I'm like, yes, that is what she saw. So that was the one that really sticks with me. But yeah, there are several. I mean, a lady who saw a teacher who saw a 15-foot tall praying mantis walking down Kyle Road in O'Fallon, Illinois, while jogging at 3 a.m. That one sticks with me too.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't think. Here's one of the things that was weird to me is like I wouldn't think that UFOs or ETs would come out in the middle of a big city and just walk down the street. but you hear a lot of that.
Yeah,
That is kind of strange.
yeah. I remember one time I got a case from the Marriott Hotel in Woodland Hills, which is really one of the most densely populated suburbs there is. There's not a stretch of free land there anywhere. And the Marriott Hotel is surrounded by malls and banks and gas stations and, I mean, restaurants. It's an, I don't know, a 12-story building, 15, something like that. A big hotel. She was on the 6th floor. Tracy is her name. And she's like, I don't know what I saw. It could have been a ghostly thing or a demon. I'm like, well, just describe it. And she says, the room filled up with red light.
Oh.
Because she felt something on her bed. She woke up and there was a silhouette of a being standing on her bed. I'm like, well, describe it to me. She says, I couldn't really see the face, but had this really skinny body, really skinny, and this big head. And it frightened me so bad I could not move. And that in essence is what she saw on that time. But going through her history, she had previous episodes like that. And her best friend had a UFO land in the alley outside her condo.
Oh, geez.
And this was in Chatsworth, again, a densely populated area.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all connected to hers because that same night, Tracy's boyfriend had the same darn experience.
Really?
Sleeping right next to Tracy. Had a UFO land, yeah. And they had a being come into the house. It was a whole big deal. So, yeah, this can happen anywhere.
Yeah, that is incredible. And, you know, I was always thinking that, you know, these are things that happen in secrecy, but I guess not. So we have a question from the audience here. What does it mean when someone dreams about UFOs vividly? Does it mean the phenomena is involved with us? I guess probably the person is having the dream.
I'm going to say a guarded yes, because people certainly dream. And just because you have a dream about UFOs does not necessarily mean that you're having contact. But I will say if these dreams are exceedingly vivid, there's a lot of emotion to it. If they seem to follow a sort of narrative, as opposed to dreams which are very, very fluid and all over the place. If it's repeated, if you've had a close-up UFO sighting at any time, if you're super interested in the subject, if you have trouble sleeping, if you had unusual, I mean, there's a whole checklist you can go down to determine this, but dreams about UFOs is a big one. It's one of the top 10 signs, I would say, of contact.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially they're vivid, right? Because it's almost like you're recalling a memory.
It's precisely that. Yeah. I think a lot, there is some people have memory problems. Well, perhaps not the best way to put it, but yeah, there's some memory issues
Right.
With close-up contact. Missing time is a real thing. And so often that will come back very powerfully in dreams. I mean, that's what happened to Betty Hill. Right. She, after her missing time, she had very vivid dreams, and she wrote them down. And these are in the book on her case by John Fuller, the UFO, The Interrupted Journey. And her dream, if you read her dream recall, and then the hypnotic regression, her dream recall was more accurate, more clear, more concise. And the hypnosis did uncover some new details, but barely. She remembered pretty much everything in the dream state.
Yeah, the thing about those recordings, they were so scary. They were filled with so much fear, and you can hear it in both their voices. Actually, that was some scary stuff.
Yeah, especially Barney. Yeah, my heart goes out to him. And having talked to a lot of people, yes, people have wept on the phone, as I'm interviewing them, or in person.
Right.
Because the fear is a big deal for us. We're such scaredy cats. We've been trained to fear anything remotely unknown.
Right.
Anyone who looks even a little different, like, oh my God. And I get it. It's scary if a gray appears in your bedroom. Next thing you know, you're on a table and you can't move and things are happening you don't fully understand.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the worst part of it. I don't think this is a malevolent phenomena. This is my personal opinion. There are people who I've interviewed who absolutely wholeheartedly disagree. But I can tell you the vast majority of people I interview do have fear initially, often. Not at all unusual, but after 4 or 5 onboard experiences or face-to-face or sightings, they start to get over it because they realize, I haven't been hurt. Many have been healed. Most have had a sort of a spiritual mini enlightenment, or certainly an awakening, a transformation. That's a rule more than an exception.
So most people have, in general, a good experience and might benefit from it in some way.
Ultimately, initially, no. Initially, they'll say, I couldn't sleep. I have to sleep with the light on, and I have sleep problems and insomnia. I have PT. I'm having nightmares. So it can be very difficult for people. And
do you know, I guess with all the folks that you've interviewed, has ever the topic come up of imprinting memories that just to help them feel better about the entire situation?
Like screen memories, that sort of thing. Yeah, certainly. I think that is something that does happen with any trauma. It's not exclusive to the UFO field. But that's quite common, actually. So Whitley Strieber certainly talked about seeing what he thought were owls at his window. And I've heard that. I've heard everything you can imagine in terms of, what came into my room. Especially for children, they'll see clowns. Oh, really? Superheroes. Superheroes, Barbie dolls. One lady, she just go, I saw and I woke up and these 3-foot tall teddy bears walked into my room through the wall. I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. And I'm watching them, and I'm staring at them, and then that image dissolved, and she could see that they were in fact grays. Screen memories are not uncommon. Some people will see normal human-looking people, beautiful people, someone normal, a relative, could be a parent or an older sibling. I've heard that a few times. This is upsetting for some people too, because they're thinking, they're being deceptive. They're trying to pull a fast one on me, and I don't know that that's their intention. I have to respect a witness when they tell them, it's their experience. Right. It's their right to interpret it the way that they experienced it. I would never in a million years step on that or deny it or try to rationalize it in any way. But having heard so much of this, I don't think it's malevolent. I don't think it's intentionally trying to scare people. I think they have a real problem with that, honestly, because the first things they will say, and this is absolutely almost universal, happens every darn time, almost without exception. They say, don't be afraid. Have no fear. You're fine. Everything's okay.
Yeah, so they try to soothe
no harm will
the
come
individual.
To you.
Yeah,
over and over and over again. Every single time. That's what they will say. And I think other researchers will confirm that, and certainly I know experiencers will. And the very, very worst I hear is when people are taken on board and they see an alien instrument coming towards them. Sometimes a needle. That's pretty rare, actually, but it does happen. But they'll see the grays coming at them with a device tubing out of the ceiling, perhaps, or a handheld instrument of some kind. And they just lose their minds. They panic. And when you're in complete fear, it's not a pleasant experience. And you're not likely to say, this, I like this. This was fun. No. So that's the worst I hear. What I don't hear is just outright malevolence. ETs, intentionally hurting people, intentionally scaring people. They are doing their best to calm you down. And this is, I think, one of the root causes of missing time. Because the last thing they want to do is have you in a complete panic. Right. Like, this person's not ready. And
that makes total sense. Got to get rid of those bad memories.
Yeah. My first book was UFO Healings, because I'm like, I think this experience is being misrepresented in the media. People I'm talking to are not describing being experimented and tortured, which is what the media was presenting and still does to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not true. I mean, I should say in the cases I've researched, I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And, out of hundreds and hundreds, yeah, but it can be very scary and unpleasant. But people are healed. They're shown the engine room. They're taken up to the observation deck and they're like, look out the window. And they'll see Earth far below. That's pretty common. So sometimes the moon, more rarely they'll see Saturn. That's turned up several times. I thought, wow. To hear that 3, 4, then 5 times, I'm like, this is not a coincidence.
Yeah, that's quite the trip. All of a sudden, unplanned trip.
Imagine looking out the window and seeing Saturn close up.
Yeah, that's wild. But listen, you've got enough research here to complete a thesis on a PhD. So with all the people that you've interviewed, all the experiences and stuff like that, what do they want? Have you come up to any kind of a theory behind that?
Well, certainly. And I think if you examine the onboard cases in particular, objectively, throwing away your belief system, whether it's these are demonic or what have you, these are time travelers. No, just throw that away and let's look at the facts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've got a pretty good handle just based on what they're doing, their behavior, what they're saying. And what I've found, I think, matches up precisely with what Edith Fiore has found, Barbara Lamb, John Mack, Timothy Good, other researchers to a certain extent. And that is, well, certainly they're collecting genetic material. We know this. They are creating hybrid babies that are half what we would call gray, half human, which is in a bit of a misnomer because the fact is the contactees are being told that the grays themselves are essentially human. They have the same genetics. We have the same
really?
age. Yep. They're all humanoid. Every last darn one of these guys is humanoid. Whether you're talking about a praying mantis or a Nordic, a human looking, or just strange humanoids, little blue beings, tall whites, they're all sharing the same genetics. And the contactees who get past the fear and can communicate will get that message. They will get it. And it will be something along the lines of, we are you, you are us, we are one. They make it as clear as they possibly can. So that is one of the things they're doing. Another is to wake us up to our own psychic abilities and our, abilities to recognize that we are immortal beings. So they really will spark that in people. People who have a contact, as a rule, will start having astral projection. They will experience precognition, healing abilities, physical levitation in a bunch of cases. That surprised me. Like, wow.
Physical levitation, wow.
Yes. Yeah. I ended up just recently doing a whole study of that in one of my latest books, Not From Here. I put a whole chapter on that because that happened to Whitley Strieber. It happened to Stephen Greer. It happened to cases from Bud Hopkins. Jacques Vallée had a case. I'm like, I started going through, Dolly Safran, the subject of my book Symmetry, had that happen to her. I actually asked her, I'm like, I don't suppose you've ever levitated. And she's like, well, actually, you should mention that. Because she hadn't mentioned it. People don't talk about it because who's going to believe them?
Right.
Already you're like, oh, aliens came in my room. They healed me. No, they came through the wall. They levitated me up the beam of light and so forth. So yeah, that's another one of their agendas, is to wake us up to our own abilities, which is past life recall and all the stuff that you think of as paranormal abilities. And another very prominent agenda, mission, goal on the ETs is to warn us and inform us and guide us that we are on the wrong pathway in the way that we treat each other and our planet. And they're very specific regarding our warlike ways and aggression, regarding our destruction of the environment, chopping the forests and polluting the water. Mm-hmm. They're very specific about our use of nuclear weapons. That is the number one message, really. Nuclear proliferation. That comes up almost any time anyone gets any communication beyond "don't be afraid." So that is another very prominent agenda. Those are the three main things that they're trying to achieve. But, there's multiple agendas.
Absolutely. And those are all really important, right? As a matter of fact, they're so important. They're constant topics among folks in different countries, different, political alignments and things like that, right? Things like the environment and nuclear powers. And, of course, war, thanks to what's happening out in with Russia and Ukraine, which is one of the big things right now.
Yeah, and that's what I would like anyone to think about who says, these are demonic. I'm like, really? Yeah. They're going to heal you and warn you about nuclear proliferation and pollution? Does that sound like... I ended up buying all the books on demons and interviewing people.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I've interviewed some people who are basically had bad battles with demonic ghosts or spirits or poltergeists, to the point where they were being knocked down and thrown across the room and beat up and possessed in a few cases, 4 or 5 I personally interviewed. But I got all the books on it. It's a real phenomenon. It's not ETs. We treat each other far more horribly than they treat us. We are a demonic species in some way in the way we treat each other, which is just downright evil. The lying and the corruption and the cheating and the stealing and the greed is something we impose upon others, especially if it's a stranger. And what's more stranger than a ET? So when they come into your house, our first thought is, this is evil. They're trying to hurt us.
Right. It's unnatural.
It's demonic.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. We're imposing our own cultural norms, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we have to be real careful to be objective. This is what I always tell contactees. Let's write down your experiences. Let's see what actually happened to you as opposed to how you feel about it. Let's first look at the facts.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. One time during the podcast here, we had a conversation. What happens if the phenomenons, what if they somehow come into contact with each other? UFOs and this whole demonic possession situation. It kind of opened a whole new door to a different kind of experience there.
There's weird link-ups. There definitely is.
Yeah, totally. Here's a question. Now, Andre asked a question here about your thoughts on the government and tracking UFOs and things like that. But I want to phrase this a little different. So you've had the 30 plus years experience. You've been through all 30 years of ufology, basically. You've seen it from back in the 80s to what it is now. You know about OSAP, ATIP, Louis Elizondo, To the Stars Academy, all the latest and greatest things that have been going on. Do you think any of that's really going to go anywhere?
No, I hate to say it. I'm a little jaded having been in this field for so long, because when I got involved, they're like, disclosure's coming. You came in the field at the right time. I'm like, oh, really? Wow, I can't wait. And then, of course, it never happened.
Right.
Let me just put it this way. The lies began from the beginning, from the 40s, right? We know this. It's demonstrable. It's easily proven there is a cover-up. Project Blue Book was a publicity stunt, even, or just a way to sort of tell people, shut up, there's nothing to this, which is what Blue Book said. If you saw a UFO, it's a hoax, it's a hallucination, it's a misperception. Go away. That's what the Robertson panel found. That's what the other one, gosh, I forgot its name, but it'll come to me. There was 3 main government studies. And not until recently has our government done a 180-degree turn and said, okay, maybe there's something to it. So I'm encouraged by that. I am. I mean, that's brought a lot of attention to this subject. But they're talking about sightings and showing us little dots on the screen when I know for a fact that they have much better footage. They have the craft. They have the Roswell craft. No, they have the bodies. They know what this is. Stop pointing to this little light and asking, oh, could this be Russian? Stop it. That's not disclosure. No, I don't trust them. They're still lying. And this recent tracking unit is called Arrow. This is the one I think that's getting the most attention.
Right.
This is such a mouthful. The All-Domain Anomaly Reconnaissance Office. I got that right.
Yeah, with led by Dr. Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, did you see that? interview with
did. Yeah, well, it was terrible.
he was arrogant. I'm like, really? Oh.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up, and it has 6 main goals, which the first 3 I can understand, which is one is surveillance. Let's just basically track this. The second was, I think, to determine its capabilities. The first 3 were along those lines. What is this doing? How powerful is it? What is it? This sort of thing. But the last 3 curled my toes, because I think there's 6 goals. The 4th was governance. We need to govern this phenomena, which kind of makes me laugh. I'm like, well, good luck.
How would you do that? That's weird.
These fly around circles around our greatest aircraft. While we're bombing and killing each other and funding wars for both sides of a country to kill off the human population, these guys are flying down and scooping people up and saying, stop it, stop it, stop it. So no, I don't think they're hostile, and I don't think we can govern them. The 5th goal was mitigation. I'm like, oh, okay. Which I think speaks to that this year, the Chinese balloon and what followed after that. We've shot down 4 UFOs. No, you haven't.
Yeah, that was exceptional mitigation, yes.
That was a propaganda exercise, which I think is leading towards their ultimate agenda of a false flag.
Right.
Which I'm worried about. And we can get into that if you want. But yeah, the 6th step was to gain their technology. Well, they've already done that to a certain extent, and we know that they've reverse engineered it just based on how many hundreds and hundreds of whistleblowers are there now? Closer to 1,000.
Too many.
Right?
Too many.
We know we have some of this technology reverse engineered to an extent. The TR-3B, some of these rectangular craft, triangular craft are our own for sure. The sphericals, they showed one on the news recently. I talked to Dolly Saffron about that. She's my kind of go-to gal. She's a fully conscious contactee, subject of my book, Symmetry. And she's like, that's government. Her family was in, government. Her father, I should say. So she's in a position to know from both sides, ET and military.
Yeah, there's just no doubt that some of the stuff that we're seeing is advanced technology that we have. But it's just crazy how they're able to spin this to make it seem like it's, try to make it seem like it's to the general public it's Russia or China, instead of, that some of that could be extraterrestrial. It's just fantastic. It just makes
that's their whole. How much money is in the black budget? I'm not sure, but
nobody knows.
But most of the good majority of your tax dollars are not going for your benefit. It's going to black budget projects. It's going to all of this to basically deceive you. I mean, this is my opinion, but just based on what I've learned about this, I'm not happy with how our government is handling governments handling this whole UFO situation. They know it's real. The only ET threat is to them and their power structure and their control over the population and their narrative of these are bad guys coming to hurt us. Right. No, they're not. You are the one who is hurting us. We're hurting each other, not them.
Yeah. And the main guy that you mentioned earlier that has always had that same message is Stephen Greer. And the more we get into this government insight, oversight, whatever you want to call it, Stephen Greer's ideas and what he's talked about the false flag it gets stronger and stronger as far as what we're probably seeing. It's kind of strange, but he's always had that message for us.
Yeah, I've talked to him several times over the years. I wanted to get him to write the foreword for my book, UFO Healings. Oh, right. He wouldn't. He's like, do you use the word abduction? I'm like, well, it's a real positive viewpoint on the UFO phenomena. I was one of the first book on healings. But he's like, no. People aren't being abducted. I'm like, well, you think you're wrong about that. People are being taken on board. It's not just you. I mean, yeah, I think he's done some tremendous good work. I will say that. Forming CSETI, to call down UFOs. I joined the charter group in LA, and
Oh,
We
did
had a
you?
sighting on the first night. I could not
Really?
believe it. This was 1992 again. That was a big year for me.
Yeah.
Boy, ETs came down in force for me. I was like, wow, this is another sighting. I must have had 5 or 10 that year alone.
Yeah, if that doesn't make you believer, what will?
Yeah, that makes you a knower.
Yeah.
It's like people say, "Are you a UFO believer?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, you could say that, but experiential knowledge is undeniable. You know."
Exactly. Absolutely. I have another question here from Maha UFO. Now, he had a sighting of what he described as a half-winged Chevron. So he's saying, have you ever come across anyone that's reported such a craft?
Yeah, I think there's a dazzling variety of UFO shapes, which is really interesting to me and always baffled me. And I've kind of come to realize that they can put on any shape or appearance that they want.
Mm-hmm.
Most cases are your classic saucer, honestly. And cigar shaped is not uncommon, but from a certain angle, I think a saucer will look like a cigar shape. But chevron is quite common. A V-shaped, a chevron, a manta ray, something that's sort of a half disc, but not along those lines, I think is what people are often describing. Egg-shaped does come up. That's not super common. But yeah, they can, mimic all kinds of things. They can look like a cloud if they want. They can go invisible. They can, I've got a few cases where they've appeared as planes or helicopters. But they weren't. That's not what they were.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they definitely have some really advanced technology for sure. And Michael Kennedy is mentioning the Stephen Greer, the new movie coming up, The Lost Century. I think he says, what is it called? The Lost Century, talking about getting everything back. Have you heard about that? Well, it's going to be released in June, I believe.
Oh, no. I've watched, he's done his work on disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Man, he really spearheaded that as well. Now that's a forefront of the UFO research.
Yeah, he's actually going to have his second national press conference, June 10th through the 12th in Washington D.C. So that should be something to watch.
Yeah. And the suppressed technology. I mean, he's right on the money with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's doing really important work where a lot of other people aren't.
Yeah.
Huge kudos. I mean, he's got a lot of controversies. He's got his detractors and supporters for sure, as we all do in this field.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody does. I mean, what can you do? It is. Everybody has an opinion of what this is. Sadly, I wish that the government would be more about like doing your kind of work and talking to the actual experiencers rather than just going off of military reports and things like that. But I can understand, right? They're looking for data in some way. And
that's never going to happen. They're looking at sightings. Really? Yeah. What about how many hundreds upon hundreds of landing trace cases? You want evidence? Yeah. Look at that. Look at where the ground was fused to glass.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the cases where they landed on, like the Trans-en-Provence case in France. It crushed the railroad ties. That thing was heavy. We know that something landed there. It's proof. It's much better evidence than what they're talking about. And Betty and Barney Hill and Whitley Strieber and Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, Herbert Schirmer, Betty Andreasen, and all of these people who've been on board. Let's talk about that.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's where I think they need to go. But I don't know. It's frustrating.
It never will.
It never will. It's so frustrating. So I promise I won't keep you on here too long. But let's talk about your upcoming projects and things that people can look forward to.
Hey, thanks, Manny. I appreciate that. Yeah, my 2 most recent books are Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure, the hardest book I ever had to write because it's the life story of Dolly Saffron, a fully conscious contactee. But my favorite book, I think, of all that I've written. I have a few favorites.
Says a lot because you've written quite a lot of books.
I mean, that one really takes a deep, deep dive into what it's like to be fully conscious contactee with no fear, no hypnosis, just on board, or full-on relationship with the ETs. And I've talked to a handful of people who had that experience, but none like her. So I'm super excited about that. That book is doing really well. I'm so happy. And also Not From Here, Volume 4 came out also. Well, I guess it's last year now. How time marches forward, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
But I love those Not From Here series because those are all my articles I'd written for magazines.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, gosh, they've disappeared. I've got to dig those out.
Right.
And I updated all of them. It's all about the weirder cases, cases a lot of people won't touch because they're just on the far end of the fringe of the fringe in some cases.
Right.
But so interesting. And the cases of UFOs hovering over prisons. Who knew that was a thing?
Yeah, I would never think that.
Yeah, or mines, or graveyards, or cases where they lift cards up and carry them a mile and set them back down. There was a chapter, or alien hitchhikers. That was one of my favorite chapters, where people pick up, people that aren't human. It's really so that I'm going to put out a volume 5 of that. I'm working on another book about very close encounters, another on my own out-of-body experiences, a sequel to Symmetry. I've got a lot of irons in the fire. I'm usually writing 2 or 3 or 4 books at once.
Geez, that definitely will keep you busy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Symmetry?
Yeah, this is basically the life story of Dolly Safran, a former nurse. She worked for the Department of the Treasury Department. She's a lifeguard, a really good witness who at age 14 had enough of missing time and UFO sightings and dreams at night that she was like, these are not dreams. I'm going somewhere. And she had an encounter at age 14 in the Florida Everglades with a UFO that dropped down behind her house. There were little portholes. And she's like, oh my gosh, look at there's figures in there. They're aliens. It's happening again. Oh my God. She dives under her bed, right? And that's her room fills with light. She wakes up, it's the next morning. She's wearing someone else's pajamas, inside out and backwards. Goes to tell her mom. Her mom's like, shut up. I hate this subject. Don't talk about it. The radio comes on. UFOs over the Everglades last night. Dolly's like, oh my God. And her dad walks in and says, go to the bathroom and meditate. You need to figure out what's going on. He knew. He was a contactee. All contactees are pretty much generational. So she goes and meditates and consciously recalls her experience.
Really?
On, and would have experiences pretty much weekly. So we're talking well over hundreds. But yeah, she recalled being taken on board. She threw up. They cleaned her up. They said, you remember us? You know who we are? I'm Mama. That's her main gray contact, a tall gray. Mm-hmm. The ships themselves are embodied alive. The ship introduced himself. He's like, you know me. She's like, oh, I do. And they took her on a tour of the craft, up to the engine room. I mean, the whole deal. They said, sit down in the pilot seat. We've got a surprise for you. And this is one of the cases I mentioned. Took her to Saturn. Wow. She told me, oh my gosh, this is what Jay Gardner described. This is what other people have described. Took her to the moon. They flew around it several times. It's what a Navy medic described to me. Kevin Cameron, a great witness. And that was her first experience in a nutshell. More happened, but they asked her, what do you want to do with your life? She's like, I'd love to learn how to fly your craft.
Right. Since I'm here.
We're like, well, okay. It's a big ask, but if you really want, we can teach you how to do that. And we're so proud of you for having woken up, because most people don't, and you did, and you should be really proud. And she was, because this was a big step, and that most people don't reach. But she, it took her 5 years of training, and what do you call it? Psychological training or psychic training.
Right.
These craft are flown psychically.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally sat her in the seat one day. I'm like, you're ready. She psychically hooked up with the craft, and off they went to a gas giant in another solar system.
Wow, that is amazing.
She works very closely with them for decades. She's now in her 60s. So that was back in the 70s.
Wow. So she definitely is an experiencer. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah, she's got the evidence to prove it. Multiple witnesses who I've interviewed, corroborating witnesses, medical records, which I've seen, implants and healings and so forth. Photographs. How rare is it for a contactee to get photographs? Very. It's very rare. She's got them. Moving films, daylight, close up of the craft coming down over her house. You can see this on her YouTube channel.
Oh, she's got a YouTube channel. Gotta go and visit that. Definitely.
She'll come on the show, I'm sure, if you want.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get her on here to talk about her experience.
Yeah, she's probably my favorite interview ever.
Oh, really?
It's just to hear the stuff, because it connected, you know, it answered the questions for me. Like, what are the AI grays? Or, you know, is there a difference between the tall gray, you know, all the different species? And she's like, well, yeah, I can talk about that. I'm like, please do. She answered a lot of my questions.
Wait a minute. She's actually in the live chat right now.
I tell her every time I'm on a show.
Oh, that is fantastic.
We do a lot of shows together. So.
Yeah, well, I didn't even know. If I would have known, I would have brought her on here. But Dolly, yeah, we'll have to reach out to you and have you on here. But definitely, I'm going to look forward to getting that book, Preston, first on, you know, the out of body work, because I've got to figure that out.
Yes, you do. Please.
Yes, absolutely. And Dolly's here, so definitely, folks, you should reach out, go to Amazon and look up for the book Synergy from Preston Dennett, because it sounds like Dolly has had quite the life of experiencing the ufology phenomena, and looks like there's a lot we can learn from that.
Yeah, symmetry, by the way, not synergy.
Symmetry. Absolutely. Any last words for us, Preston?
Oh, well, thanks for having me on the show. If you're a skeptic,
always my pleasure.
Yeah, if you're a skeptic, ask your family and friends or coworkers. I guarantee you'll get a story. Move away from fear. There's, you know, fear is not good. It's not useful. And just live your life in love and truth and develop your psychic abilities. That's what the ETs really want. So that would be my final message for people. Just move away from fear. Don't believe the lies of the government. Look to yourself for answers, and develop your psychic abilities.
Thank you so much, Preston, for being here with us. We got links in the description for the folks who are interested in going out there and discovering a little bit more of Preston's work. And looking forward to have you again in the future.
Anytime. Yeah.
Thank you, Preston. Fun. Ciao, everyone. And thank you for watching today.
I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. 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 You wanna be with me. You wanna feel something real, but I'm feeling differently. You're making plans to get to friends, but don't wanna face the fact that I ain't got time, I ain't got time for that. Staying up late, sleeping all day, dreaming about Cadillacs. Buying new shoes, hanging by the pool, sipping on Coke and Jack. Calling my phone when you feel alone, but I'll never call you back. 'Cause I ain't got time, I ain't got time for that. I don't give a damn, I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. 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 You're mad at me for not giving you comfort. You say that I'm away so much and now you